So what's Mochoker's not going well?
Your arms also, I saw him in the dorm, he had like chills, he was under a few blankets, he had chills. So doctor today, he gave us some kind
You're
of...
on Merosh?
Yeah.
Yeah, you overdid it for him.
Yeah.
And then somebody else. What's the salary? What's my time? He was there by Mara, huh?
He might be learning with Rav Jacobs. Sometimes he does that. He's trying to get his Kabbalah for
That's a good tool for me.
I really don't know where he is.
He can have Kabbalah isn't the right of let's get to us learning the Chassidus. Is he upstairs? Nobody would know.
You can call him.
Huh?
Call him.
Well, I don't know. They don't like these guys using the telephones up there. Would you like to just take a quick look in his arm and see if he's there?
Today is Yud-Tes.
And if he is, tell me he's got to come down. I don't care about Kabbalahs or not Kabbalahs.
Today is Yud-Tes Adar, Hatavshin Samech Tes. We're in Sefer Maimorim, Tafrei Samech Tes of the Rebbe Rashab, page Huf Gimel.
Right. So we're holding the Dina from Malucha. And so we saw that there were two inyonim in the Inyan HaIsnasis. But the Midas HaMalucha is the Akilui of the Midas HaIsnasis. And we saw there were two inyonim bezeh. We saw there was a Isnasus of the Melech Al-Am. We saw there was a relative Isnasus, which Beli Hazulas, it's not Chaya. And therefore that aspect of Hisnasus, Benefesh, is what we saw a Chiddush, that even though it's a Koyach of the Nefesh, but it's really a Koyach Nivdal Mina Nefesh. And its whole Inyan is Davke to be Miskale to Azulas Hashem Michutz Le'etzem Ha'adam, and Ein Lezeko Gilui, Ein Lezeko Geder Imloi Hazul. And that was the first and lower Inyan in the Inyan HaIsnasis. But we saw that was the Inyan of Isnasis by the Melech Benegeh to Am U'Medina. So if anybody happens to see him, they should tell him that tomorrow I wanted to look me up and I want a report for him why he wasn't here. And it's got to be made clear that from now on there's no Tirutzim Mishuk Zeh. And that was the Inyan of what is Mavua Bahavi Makemes, that his Nasas, Inyan HaMalchus, out is Amida, Bekoichis HaNefesh, is Tafke Inyan Bifnei Atzmei Muvdal Me Etzem HaNefesh, and its whole Inyan is Tafke to be Miskale Ela Zulas Tafke. However, we saw there was another Inyan in his Nasas, and that was Inyan what we called his Nasas Achmiyas. And that was the Inyan of the Reimamas, the Maila and the elevation of the Etzem HaMelech Achmei, what that's a Inyan Davke Miyuchad Im Atzmusai, and not in the even of Bechinas Nivdal Mina Etzem. No, on the contrary, it's not a Dova Bifnei Atzmei. Now, Adar does is Mitzad Etzem Mailas Atzmusai, that eventually there becomes the opportunity or the Inyan or the Istamnus by him to become a Melech Al-Am. Was Lefizeh, the Inyan of the Isnasis Al-Am or the Isnasis Al-Azulas, but that's the Koyach in Nefesh. Behagdora Peshuta Ode Inyan Malucha, Well, that is really mishum, and it's really based on the fact that the mensch is be'emes, he's merumam be'etzem atzmusay, and that's a inim which is the mile at the very etzem of the Adam, not even from the Havdalah mimenu, and on the contrary, it's not shaykh to the Zulus at all. That's his own mile atzmiyah. And what we were drawing towards the end of the last class on the Escher Bein Shnei Dvarim Ha'igla that Tluim Haber Bahar. We saw that the Isnasus Al Am is really Lefi Erech, the union of Isnasus Atzmiyas in the Adam Atzmi. But that's where we're holding on Simen Kof Gimel. So therefore we were holding, I think, by Ube'em Shesh Binyan HaMelucha Gam Kein Beis Madreges A'alef Hareimem Es Visnasas Be'etzem Husay She'enu Shayach El Azulas Klau V'Habeis Bechinas Isnasas Al Am Umadina De Beloy Azulas Enu Shayach Isnasas Zayt. That's like a sikum of the inner that we learned Ad Koi. Has everybody got the piece there?
Yeah.
And in brackets, so it is in the inyan of Malchus de Rakia. That's in what we call in the Lashon of the Gemara Malchus de Ara. That's in how it is by the Melech Lamata. So it is Lamaila in the inyan of Malchus de Rakia that base beginners by Malchus beginners is nasas al hoilemes. How the Eberste Kilo is Melech Loelamas in a direct sense. In other words, he's Merumam Umanusa, but it's in reference to and over the Elamas. Okamashikosov Havaya Moloch Geus Lovesh. That we touch it in the Shir Shal Yom of Yom HaShishi in Sefer Tehillim. At Havaya Moloch, the Eberste reigned, and in order to do that, Geus Veish, that the inyan of his isnasus, geus, meaning the idea of elevation, and isnasus, loveish, well, that's only a lavush bilvad. He literally put that on in the form of a garment. Shehu b'chinas lavush levad, v'kamoy lavush hanivdal, v'anifrad mina etzer. And just like we see the lamata, the whole inyan of our lavush is that it's nivdal and nifrad mina etzem. It's not part of the etzem, it's only just fits on to the etzem. So Lamaila, the isnasas, and the relationship of the Eberste's Malchus to the Oilamas, in a sense that he's Merumam compared to them, well, that is only a lavush bilvad, ukamei Malchus peh ukanal, like we saw earlier, that Malchus peh kolinan law, as we bring in the Pasuk Eliyahu, and we saw that was the Inyan Oilama Dibur, and like we see that the Inyan from Dibur is a Dover HaNifrad Mina Adam. When he speaks a Dibur, it goes out into the Avir HaOilam Chutz Mimeno, and it's Poel B'dvarim She Michutz Mi'Adam. So similarly, the Isnasus Al Am V'Al Oilamas, that is Lamaila, Isnasus Al Kol Brio, Kol Oilamas Kulam, well, that's Al Derech Vidin from Malchus Peh. That's all Bidvar HaMelech Shomayim Nasu, Hashem Shomayim Nasu, U'Baruch Piv Kol Tzvo'om, as the whole creation conducts itself through the Malchus of the Eberste Lefi and Alpi Dibure. U'Bechinas HaIsnasus Atzmi. Together with that, however, there's the Isnasus Atzmi She'enu Shayach El Oilamas. In other words, that the Yisrimamas and the Aflua of Elakus, how it is Mitzad Atzmi. Akamoisha Kosa B'Makim Acher B'Firush Ein Mela B'Loi. Oh, a very amazing touch, because we touched earlier that Ein Mela B'Loi Om means that without the Dova Nifrad, then there can't be a Melech. A Melech is only Melech not only on Dvorim but on Anoshim who are Davke Nifrodim Mimeno. And that was the touch Ein Melech B'Loi Om for Oshan Oimam is Nifrodim, Davke the in of a separate person. Al Zeh, it's possible to be a Melech. However, now we teach in a very different way. And we say that Ein Melech B'loi Om, the Ein Hu Loshen Hen. That the word Ein in the Gemara means Hen. Yeah, it means yes. So he said we can teach like this, that Ein Melech, that Hein, yeah, that means to say that, Ein Lochanami, Diyesh Melech, Gam B'loi Om. In other words, Ein Melech B'loi Om, exactly the opposite. That Hein Melech B'loi Om, there is, in effect, yes, there is a king B'loi Om. Yeah, how can that possibly be? Well, that's the Yisnasus Atzmiyas before the actual Gilui Al-Hoelamus of the kingdom. But Dafki, because of that, Yisnasus Atzmiyas, there will eventually be the kingdom Al-Alam. And he said, with that it makes sense, the famous Lashon that we say every day in the famous piyut of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. We say, Adein Olam Asher Molach B'terem Kol Yitzur Nivra. So he says, Adon Olam Asher Molach, no, the Eibus is Melech Ala Olamas. Or was it a Taich Gambeloi Om? How can that be? Asher Molach B'terem Kol Yitzur Nivra. Even before there was any creation, even before there came about any of the creations, then the Eibusha was already Melech. In other words, it B'loyom. There wasn't yet the whole Inyan from Am at that stage, and yet nonetheless he was still considered Moloch. He was still considered the Inyan from Melech, and that's the Pshat. Ein Melech B'loyom Hein Melech. There is such a thing as Melech B'loyom, meaning the Etzem Rimamus of the Etzem HaMelech B'Atzmosei. V'lamayla, that's the Eibishter, how he is mitzad etzem midas hamalchus als miyuchet betachlis with him prior to his becoming melech kol ha'olamas, and that's the pshat. But terem kol yitzur nir, but prior to any appearance of any nivra. But that's the mitzvah mavur. That's the famous question that's asked in the Pirushi Hasidah, that many people say, well, it's shaykh to say that he was Mola, but Terem Kol Yitzur Nivra. Unless there was any Nivroim, there wasn't what to be Melech over. Now that means the Inyan HaMelukah is mitzad the Reimamus of the Etzem. Now the difference being that Lamata, somebody who's Bereimamus or Etzem, probably will eventually become a king. Lamaila, it's all mitzad the Inyan of the Bechira of the Eibush himself, as we saw earlier. Vehine Beis HaMadreges are these two inyonim. Hagam shehem rechoikim ze mizeh. They're rechoikim in the sense that one is mamish mitzad the milas ha'etzem and miyuchat betachlis with the etzem, and the other being only nivdal mi ha'etzem l'tzorech hazulas. So that means that they're very distant in their mahus one from the other. Mikol mochim yesh lehem shaychus zeh lezeh. Delefi erech reimamus ha'atzmus Kain who is pastors reimamus al ha, that lefi erech, meaning comparable to, and how would you say, corresponding to or proportionate to, is probably more correct to put it, proportionate to the greatness of the reimamus of etzem. Kain who, so is it the ha'ora of these pastors of reimamus Allah. In other words, a melech that is be'emes meruma begadlus amitius mitzad atzmusay, then he becomes, as it were, a melech in a greater sense. His nasas al am is much greater, more powerful, or it can spread out into a greater kingdom and into a greater number of subjects for kulu. So one is lefi erech de Adar. Ukemei chacham godo be'etzem koyach chach moshe. They said, just like somebody, if we take the midas chachma for example, that somebody who's a chacham be'etzem koyach chach moshe. That means to say he's a chacham in the very shurish of the koyach chachma in the nefesh. In other words, he's a chacham mitzad pnimius chachma, and even l'maylam is there. he's even at the Koyach HaMaskil. In other words, he gains, or he's masig in Yonim in Chokhmah, how it is in the Inyan of the Koyach HaMaskil before it even reveals it to the Nekudas HaChokhmah in the Moyak. In other words, he's already so high that he understands in Yonim even before what would be normally called Gilui by another person. He's already got it in the Shursh before it even gets that far by him. And that's a very high madrig, and that's called Chacham Be'etzem Koyach Chokhmah.
Is that like this guy that we spoke about in the Shir Kali? Betzalel, is that like Betzalel?
Yeah. We spoke about that the other day, and we said that he was a Chacham, and that he was a Mala Yosef B'Chokhmah over Tvuna over Adar. Yeah, a very, very high madrig in Chokhmah. So here the Rebbe said somebody who's a Chacham Be'etzem Koyach Chokhmah, meaning he is oifen of being maskil, and Mamsi Sichlim to himself is much higher than by normally people need to first of all gain a gilui from the Koyach HaMaskil, and then they're able to take it down into the lower aspects of the gilui HaSeichel. He gets it, and he's able to understand things and take them in his galus to him, how they are mitzad the etzem koyach of Chokhmah, how it is kolul more in the etzem HaNefesh rather than, and therefore it's brought down in, we had it over there in Tzamavov, in Avrom Zokein, the Rebbe brought down over there, certain Chachomim, that they even gain certain Giluim from the Koyach HaChokhmah, how it's kolul, mamish in the Koyach HaYuli HaAchmi, kolul in the Etzem HaNefesh mamish, if you remember, we had over there. So that's the Taich of Koyach Be'etzem, meaning the Madrega of Chokhmah, how it is mitzad the Etzem and kolul in the Etzem, which is a very rare and high Madrega, and it's not understandable to us how Inyan Chokhmah can reveal themselves to the Adam from such a Madrega. Therefore, his whole way of expressing Siklim and his whole way of knowing things is hidden and not understandable to normal Bnei Adam. In other words, they say, where did he get that from? They can't quite figure, what is the oifen of the gilui of such Siklim. However, Davke a person like that, Shemispashet Chokhmos, Beribe Chokhmas, Besikliyois, Beyoiser, or Bechokhmas Shloimeh. Take, for example, Chokhmah, and how do we know that Shloimeh Melech held by such a Madrega? Because it's written, V'Hashem Nosan Chokhmah L'Shloimeh, at the beginning of the Haftarah, Pashat Truma. It's written that V'Hashem Nosan Chokhmah L'Shloimeh Kasher Diber, like he asked Shloimeh, that he said that the Rebbe said to him, what would you like? I'll give you whatever you ask. And so he asked after the Indian Chokhmah. In other words, he was given a gilui of Chokhmah mitzad Elikut. And therefore, Chokhmah Shloimeh is an example of unusually elevated Chokhmah, completely beyond the gilui of Chokhmah, how it is by a normal bench. And what do we see? That Shediber Gimel Alofim Marshal, he spoke 3,000 Mashalim. Well, it's Mavur in Torah, the Alter Rebbe Mavayadot, that even if somebody were to say 3,000 Mashalim on one Inyan, that would be a tremendous gilui of Chokhmah mitzad the Koyach HaYuli Atzmi from Chokhmah. However, the emes of beer in that posik, if a diva Chokhmah shleishes alofim marshal, diva shleima shleishes alofim marshal, is that on every madrega he was able to say shleishes alofim marshal. On every level, how he come down through the elements of that particular inyan, he was able to say shleishes alofim marshal on that particular level, as it were, and to those who were ru'uyim lekavu b'rega level ahu. By the time he got down into the low levels, he'd already said thousands and thousands of mishalim kvar, which means that what we have in Sefer Mishlei, that's only Trumas and Maisers, cotton Biesa, from all the Mishalim that Shlomo Melech was Musugal and actually did say. So those are the Pshat, that Chokma, that Dibe Shloises Alofim, Moshel, the Vadai, Lafi Erech HaChokma B'etzem, Davke Kain, Yarbe or Yirbe, Chelkei Sichloi Amishpashet. In other words, that he would bring a raya not necessarily from the Minyan HaMalucha. We're bringing here from how, if we take any Kerch of the Nefesh, then these pashtas and the Ribuyai pashtas, and what you might call in the Ribui Gufa, the quality and the Teichen, and the Eiches of that is pashtas, is dependent in the greatness of the Etzem from which it's mispashit. And what greater the Etzem, so great is the Kamus and the Eiches of these pashtas. So he said that Moshe, the best way to understand that is to take the Ina Chochma, Chochem Godel, that we see that what greater he is, then the more he's able to talk to Kol Mini Ribuyayin, Ainyonim, which love Davki seem to come directly from that Inyan. And therefore we see that in certain halachas, in certain matters, by the Rebbe, for example, Melech HaMashiach, the Rebbe was able to talk with people with all sorts of inyanim. They're going to get to refuah, chokmasa, engineering, there's all inyanim which were bedel pili ploys. What what's this have to do with the Rebbe? We come to that would be the sort of thing, even though Bisman Ahu, he wasn't oishik in that in particularly, even though he may have, in a kitzudik way, at some time before that, made acquaintance with some of the inyanim of that Inyan. And one of the famous examples of that is, it may not be well known, but when the Rebbe came to America, the Rebbe came to America in Toshin Aleph, I think it was, he said, Yemut is given the war with the Nazis and the Japanese before it was about to start. Is later when the war actually broke out, the Rebbe gave a suggestion to the American Navy about a certain Indian of how to control submarines and how to based on his knowledge of nautical engineering, and he made them a whole sort of suggestion and a model, a whole diagram as to how to alter their submarines to not only protect them, but to make their power of attack or something of that much more effective. And they were makabel, and they paid the Rebbe for the rest of until Gimel Tammuz v'chulu. The Rebbe received a pension, like a milga, it's called, from the American naval military naval organizations, or ranks or whatever they were paid, I don't know, all the time, all the way through. And they said that's one of the reasons why the Rebbe never took things personally, that he had an income, he had his basic income, what he needed for his household from that. Called him after the Rebbe made that suggestion, it was so powerfully effective for the American military forces, particularly in the naval system of their submarines, that they were just they considered the Rebbe one of their staff, until years and years later they kept paying him a sort of pension, or like I recognized there was quite a few dollars, and the Rebbe lived very simply, so he managed to do quite basically well. And so it appears that the Rebbe never really took any pay or salary or muskuetas from anybody except something that he'd actually, with his own powers, he had actually earned it. That's where he took his, not from the New York, council, city council, or anything, not from the Hasidim either. The Rebbe used to take from certain people. The Rebbe took personal, what's called Maimed geld. the Rebbe did accept certain sums of money for Maimad Geld, but only on a limited basis. And a lot of the money that was given for Maimad was given by the Rebbe to all sorts of secret little kupot that he had for helping people in France. There were tens of families that used to get money directly from the Rebbe. Some of them not even knew about it. But the Rebbe had all these amazing connected kupas where he used to give out to all sorts of people and all sorts of funds and things that people didn't know that was coming from him. There's only a few chosen individuals actually knew about it. And so a few other people who actually, the Rebbe actually received from them money personally. But I was there once, I was in Yechidus. When I finished what I was about to say before I left, I put my hand in my bosom and I pulled out a sum of money inside an envelope, but it was a sum of money in American dollars, and so I sort of went like that to the Rebbe with this envelope. The Rebbe looked at me for a moment, with a slight question in his eye, and I said, "This is Maimad Geld from Rebbe." I said, "That is Maimad money for the Rebbe." So the Rebbe nodded, and he took it, and he bent down right to the bottom, and he opened a drawer right down near the bottom of his thing. He pulled the drawer open, and he slipped the envelope, and he closed the drawer. And I later heard from my Wiener Dover, that's the sign that the Rebbe took it from. So if the Rebbe put it down that bottom drawer, that was a sign that he took it. So I once spent Sion Cohen, Rebbe Cohen. He went to the Rebbe, Tisha, and I didn't go that Tisha, and I gave him money. I told him I want you to give it to the Rebbe in Yechidus. And also he did the same thing as he was about to leave. His Yechidus with the Rebbe, he took out this envelope, and the Rebbe sort of made a sign, what is this? And so he started saying, this is Maimad money from Gafni or something. So the Rebbe said, das ist Maimad Geld von Rav Gafni. So the Rebbe sort of almost knew what he was about to say. His belly got out, and the Rebbe said, das ist Maimad Geld von Rav Gafni. And the Rebbe took and he did exactly the same thing. But later on they wouldn't let you do it. B'shum Oven you weren't allowed to do it. Later on, in the later years, that you weren't allowed to give the Rebbe anything in Yechidus except for the middle. They used to sort of tell you, you had to declare what you got on you. They didn't actually frisk you, but they said under no circumstance must you give the Rebbe anything in Yechidus, only the tzedakah. Right, he's already complaining. He's saying that this is not the learning. Right, so we've got a little joke occasionally. All right, so he says, there is a madrega for Melech, Gambeloi and that was the meaning of the famous piyut, Adayin Olam, but Terem Koyen Tzunim. The first one on how the people asked the Shaila, was it a Shaila? And if he said, it's the Madrega Hoelyoina from which the Hisnasa Salam draws. And therefore it's short to say, Beterem Kol Yitzunim. Vehine Beis Madrega. Agam Shem Rechekim Zemizeh, Mikol Mochem Yeshlem Shaichet. Oh, so if he Roim Emes Atzmes, Keinu is Pashtas Roim Emes Allah. Then we brought the mashal of the Chacham Gadol. So we see that that's a mashal from Shali HaKoiches. But however, we see that Dafke, when the Chachma is Madrega Haki Nifloa, that we can imagine Chachma, that it comes from the Etzem Koyach HaChachma, or by Shlomo HaMelech, it came Mitzad the Eibushes giving him Chachma, which is probably even more wondrous than that. Then, he was able to say B'Ishpashtas, Ubegolui Sikliim Kimat Bli Hagbola. The Vadai Lefi Erech HaChachma B'Etzem, Davke Kein Yirbe Chelche Sikli HaMishpashei. That according to the etzem ayin of the chokhmah, meaning how it is mitzad the etzem miyuchad betachlis with the etzem, like the koyches hayulim miyuchadim with the etzem. So the koyach chokhmah is miyuchad betachlis hayirud and kolul in the etzem. So therefore, lefi zeh kein hu inyan mishpashe. U'kumay dover gush. So now we go down into Moshel Gashmi. A dover gush means a solid object, but gush meaning that it's made up of particles, but the particles are all sort of joined together and solidified. That's called a gush, like a piece of earth that's solid, but that's called a gush. Shemishchalchim lechalochim rabim hari ribui chalokov hein lefi goydel kamus hadover be'etem. In other words, that if you break down a dover gush into small particles, then those chalochim rabim, or the ribui of those chalochim, the number and the multiplicity of that number, is appropriate to the greatness in quantity of that dover etem. In other words, a small piece of earth can't give you the same number of chalokim as a big piece of earth can, or any other form of gush that splits into particles. So the same way, beruchnis ha'inyan, you can't get a ribui sikliim from something which is not merumam be'etem and b'madrega gavoya in be'etem. So what more the greatness of the etem, so are the number of the chalokim of the seichel, which are mispashit mimeno. And on the contrary, we could say that maybe the inyan by Shlomo HaMelech, we could say that because that came mitzad v'Hashem nosen chokhmah l'Shlomo, it came mitzad the inyan from Elokus, then Elokus, being as it is be'etzem adova muvdal min hanivroim be'etzem minyonoi, and then adova hamuvdal, what more it's muvdal from the Matthias, is if it gives forth ayin for ishpashtas, then that ishpashtas is how do you call it, bli hagbola and lamayla me medida v'hagbola. In other words, what more mudal, what more great the chokhmah of that person is mudal mishari in yoneh chokhmah, the more he's able to be mishpashet b'ribuya siklim, and we see that that's not just for ribuya siklim, for people who are balima madregas. No, on the contrary, he's able to come down and fill it to a helmet cotton, and as well known, the famous cloud, that what greater the chacham be'etzem chachmosei, so greater he is a afilo amalamed, afilo instructor to those who are not yet into that whole inyan of chachma. Of somebody who's not mamish developed in that inyan of the chachma, he finds it hard to bring it down to simple beginners. Of somebody who's tremendously elevated in that chokhmah, in a way that he's different than all other people, he's able to bring it down to the simple beginner. Just like we saw be'inyan chokhmah, so in that regard, the inyan of the comparison to other koyches is relevant. And here we have a good example of the point I just made, because here the inyan of the whole concept of the malucha is reimamas, and reimamas is dafka going away from Makablim. It's dafka in front of dollar and elevation, and what you might call reimamas histalkas from the Makablim. So there we see what greater that reimamas and that withdrawal be'emes and be'etem from the Makablim, the greater the hishpashtas to them and for their necessities, what that's the inyan of the hishpashtas of the Melech Halam, in order to give himself over eventually to the Inyonei HaMedina, that's incomparably greater in comparison to the greatness of the Yisraelis or Atzmas. Now here is a very fascinating thing that there is. So it is the other way round. The Masha Merumam bi Atzmoi, Vulufi Erech is Pashtus, Haremamas, Vehagedula Shaloi. Beroiv Am, Medina, Beroiv Am Medina. Okemoi Melech Godel, Am Medina Gedola, Beroiv Am, Hu Yesa Godel Umarumam Bi'atzme Mimelakoton Al Medina Kitana Umiuta. So the Rebbe said the other way around. He said, if we see a melech, that he's had a code, Marumam, and he's a melech, Beis Pashtus, Aremamas, Vagdula Shaloi, Beroiv Amuma Dina, that he's got a tremendously big Medina, and he's a great king, he's an emperor, Al Kama Vakama, Medinas, yes, so we have to say that he is greater, Marumam Bi'atzmei, than somebody who's a Melech ala Medina Ketana. And we're not just saying that because he's a Melech ala a lot of people, that he must be greater Bi'atzmei. That's not exactly what we mean. For Hainu, therefore the Rebbe Taisa, Hainu is a Lashon Biur. Shalidei Isnasus al Ha'om Mizgala B'chinas Isnasus Atzmi, or Atzmoi. Or Mikol Mochim. B'chinas Remus or Atzim Zeu Koech Atzmi She'eno Nibdo Mina Etzem. V'Aremus al Am B'chinas Koech Nibdo She'shayach al Azuras. So here we need to understand what is the kilo. What do I earn in the beer by this going back the other way? I was working okay. I said that Lafi de Isnasus Atzmias, but that's how it'll be mispashit al Am Medina, and the more the greatness, the more there'll be a corresponding hispashtas. And on the contrary, that's a good dogma of the Havdalah and the Reimamas from the Ribu Makablim makes the hispashtas to them automatically and how do you call it, proportionately greater. So what is it? What do we earn by going back the other way? We say no, Kain Lahefa. That if we see a Ribui hispashtas, a Ribui Gedula in the Indian of the Am Medina, on a Melech Godel, on a Medina Gedela V'Ravam, then we have to say he's more Godel Marumi, but Atzmei than somebody who's not like that. What I'm going from, I'm looking at the Medina, the Ravam, and from that I'm coming to a picture and to assume that he must be greater Be'etzem Atzmusei. That's just saying the other way around what I said anyway. It would seem that I'm saying that the greater the Rim Atzmias, then the greater the Ispashtas. So what do I earn by saying no? The more you see, the greater it's a sign that he must be a greater king, Be'etzem Atzmusei, a Berim. Therefore, we have to say that the key word is in that Vahainu. The Hainu is a beer. Shali Dei Snasas Aloam Ke'enu, Mizgala B'chinas Snasas Atzm. Sometimes it works the other way around. The Dafki through becoming a Melech Al Ribui Medina V'Roiv Am, well, that is Megala, and that causes a Gilui of the Reimah. In other words, let's say the king, if we'll say he wasn't elected by the people, and he wasn't persuaded, and first of all, there was miscalculated by him all, the whole Seder, the Gilui, the Reimah Satzmis, and it came down into the people, but let's say that he was a conqueror and a great leader, and he took over a whole series of Medinas, and then he found a necessity on his part to become a king. I think there have been certain things like that in history. Certain great figures, because they conquered large areas and they took over, and in the end they had no brainer, as it were, almost, but to become great. So the very fact that they are faced with this challenge of Ribu Medinas, and that comes under their control, or since the two are parallel and proportional one to the other, well, that indicates to me, or not only it indicates to me, but we have to say that causes a Gilui of the Reimah Masak Atzmas. Even though the Reimah Atzmas wasn't Begilui, but Chila, of a tremendous demand of all the Reimah Medina, or that causes a Gilui of the Reimah Masak Atzmas. In other words, Kain lahifuk, that's mamish lahifuk in the Seder HaRogim. However, we have to say that everything being as it is, bashkocha pratiyas, and everything is with the everything is from the Eibster, that does a zicha that opportunity of that nature would not be presented to somebody who doesn't have potentially that is nasis atzmius. In other words, why does it come about? A necessity for him to deal with Rov Am, the Geidel HaMedina, the Rov Am Shema Medina, and he becomes Mishpashik, Begidurot El Kol Ha'ela. Yeah, that is a divine providence and a divine siman that Ali Day said it's going to be Mishgale in him, Aruimamas Amitis, which makes him automatically elevated and Marumam Mishare HaMalochim from other king. And that's what we see, that there's a inen milmaila, that Pliny, if he's really meant to be a king, then one way or another it will be mishkala or mizdamein ba'olam hazela lamata. And that's what we find, that it's brought down in the Gemara Masechta Brachos, that the inen of kingdom lamata here in this world is bedugmas inyan amaluchala lamayla. In other words, that the in Malchusa di'ara ke'ein Malchusa dera rakia. So Gemara Masechta Brachos, and the Gemara tells our whole amazing ma'aser that it's well known in the Gemara that Rabbi Yosef, he was a sagi nahor. Everybody was blind, Rabbi Yosef, in his latter years. And so there was once a group of these young Talmudim, they wanted to play a trick on Rabbi Yosef, and they heard that the Melech, the Goyish Melech of that kingdom, where they were probably the Melech of Babel, or wherever he was, but Isa Hasman, is going to make a trip throughout the whole Medina, and that everybody's going to go and be Makabel the Melech. So they said, you know what, Rabbi Yosef will take you out, and you can be there, even though you don't see him, but you'll experience the great experience of the Melech going past. And so they wanted to trick him that when somebody else went past, they'd make a huge noise, and they'd say, "Oh, this is really the Melech, coming past now," and he might get mavuvu and make a mistake, or who knows, he might make a bracha. It was a pretty unpleasant trick. Well, that's what they thought they were going to do. So they take him up to the front line where all the people are standing and everybody's, restless and straying. There's the Melech going past, so it went past this huge, entourage of all the Tzarim and all the soldiers and the guns and doers and come past. So they start saying, "Oi, oi, 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 oi," go forward, and Rav Yosef just stands there absolutely unaffected, but cloudy. Doesn't show any his pious cloud. So they weren't much there with that. Then comes another huge entourage, the pre-entourage before the Melech comes, and that's rubbish. The whole people going out with this pilot. So they all start shrieking, "Oh, this is it," and the Rav Yosef just stands there, deep in thought, and he doesn't show the slightest. His pious cloud. And after that's all gone by, then there's this tremendous silence. This huge, tremendous pachad type silence falls everywhere. Nobody says a word, and then the king comes past Biatzmei, and as soon as the silence fell and the king drew close where they were, then Rabbi Yosef made a bracha, in a loud voice. He made a bracha that you make on the Goyish kings, as a cholah, mikved of the boss of Adam, bracha, and the bracha. So these guys, they all said, "How did you know that? You're blind, you don't see a thing. And we were trying to trick you, and we made a big rash, and you want to spoil. Nothing was still, absolutely nothing. Everybody's all still from pachat, and you don't see anything, and then that's when you made the bracha." So Rav Yosef said, because Malchus di'ara is ka'ein Malchus d'rakia, that the inner from Malchus down here is like it is in heaven. What's written when they get to the Malchus in heaven? It's written that when Eliyahu Hanavi was in the Meira, and he heard all sorts of, first of all he heard a storm, and then he heard a tremendous rash, birds that made a huge rash, and he heard something else, and he wasn't Mishpol Eliyahu, and then all of a sudden there was this quiet moment, and then Eliyahu said, oh, here's the Eivishter, and so the Zohar Kodesh says that Dafki when it's still, I quail the Mamadako that you can't hear, Tamon Osi Malka. That's when the king comes. When it's Tachas Ashtika, everybody's bottled. Tachas some people don't come to king. So he said, Vibal, that's what's written by Eliyahu Hanavi. So I knew that that's when the king was coming. If I'm Zetman that the Inif and Malchus, the Adar, why Malchus down here is wie Malchus the Rakia, and the Chiddush of that simple is that happened with the Goyish king. And so therefore a lot of people measure the history based on that Gemara. They learned the famous doctrine of what's called the divine inspiration of kings. Never heard about it. The American nodded his head and said he has heard of it. And the Australian shakes his head and said he hasn't heard about it. It was for bullshit. It was Dafki in the English kings that served this Gitaina B'Teika Faki Godel. They had said there was a divine right and inspiration of king. And if I once mentions a king, you told us Shepmetem V'chuli, and Charles the First never lost his head because of that. That's when Cromwell, the Roshi, gemacht the ganze uprising in England, and he had Charles Charles the First beheaded. That was the whole Indian. What they said that you can't be. There's no such thing as a divine right of king. So I see that everybody understands what I'm talking about. Pick to see if you face for us. We won't be married with it. Al Chaponim is a dover ma'anyen. And yesh leima that the Indian from Bittel Indian Amalucha ba'olam is an Indian that was totally there's Deirish, a lot of beer, a lot of ion. What's the Indian Bezer v'imtzeh chisaron v'chulu, and therefore we say that Malchus based David Taxir Gemara that the Indian of Melech HaMashiach is that he'll be Machzir la'olam the Indian for Malchus. He'll be Dafki HaMelech. Chutz mima, he'll be a Chacham. That's the Rabbi that Samech Tes brings down in the famous Maimon. He'll be a teacher. He'll be Rabbeinu. Of that same Malkeinu, he'll also be the Indian for Melech. And like the Rebbe that Samech Tes is Mavaya, though the Barich is the difference between the two titles in Melech HaMashiach Gufa. Aval Chaponim, Melech HaMashiach will be Machzir et Inyan HaMalucha L'Yeshna. That there'll be a Inyan for Melech Papashtas. Was Ein Kana Mochim Lahari Bezeh, even though it's shy to this Inyan. Because that's what the Rebbe said. If a thing like this happened, and we didn't know what his greatness, Rimah Masatim, is prior to that, or he didn't even know about it. Ulay Yesh Leima. Over the day, what does a Ribui Am? And he becomes Balavochi Shat to rule over Ribui Am. Or that itself indicates that Ribui is called out in him. Was be'emes, he had the hand of the how did that be called out in him, because it's miyuchad with the etem, and that didn't touch the etem until the whole Ribui empire had demanded by him that he should be a king of Kein Yesh Lema. Those are the beer, and that can only be bashgacha prati is by somebody the balavochi he shot to that, and therefore I feel in the history. At the Goyim, that's the Amiti Sinyan from Malucha. And therefore, one of the Chidushim by Achashverosh was that he was, even though we use him as a Moshe, they were going to use him. The Alter brings this Lakutei Torah, become him a Kemes. He's a Moshe from Melech She'achris, for Reishi Shaloi. We can take a Moshe from him to the Ina from Melech Hadiz Lamaila. Afu Pekain, he was a usurper, Nishkiven. He wasn't Ayin from a Melech Amiti, Lafi the Klol Inyan HaMelech, and yet nonetheless, since he was Taka Moilech al Sheva V'Esrim Umayya Medina, That we'd have to say, those are the limud, the Gabiim, the Cholapochas, there must have been some Mila in him, and that was the Inin, why he's a Moshaloch upon him to the Inin from Melech Shachris, Bereishit, Shaloi. And the Far Yesh Laharik Binyan there. And the Far does it in the Kuda, or even though he was a Melech Tipish, according to one day in the Gemara, also Kosof, he was a Melech Takif with all the Milas of a Melech, V'chulu. Kamish is a Shaykh, by almost a Olam on that particular arena. And if we bring certain Misholim from Malchus HaChashverosh, but again to certain Inyonim in the Inyan HaMalucha. Anyway, I can see that everybody's saying, well, yes, let's get moving, etc., so that's what we'll do. But also upon him, for now we see very amazing Indian here, and that's a diuk nifla in the Maimon, that the Rebbe is masber all, then he says, Kain la'efa. I mean, what do you earn by going back the other way? We have to say that that's moisif, the whole bill which I just gave up. Mikomokim. However, by way of summing up, we see that the Bechinas Arimas are so koyach hatzmi she'en nivdal min etzem, va'arimas al-am hu bechinas koyach nivdal sheshayich el azulas levad kanal. Kolamayla bechinas Arimas or atzmas so bechinas keser malchus da'atzilas k'moy shehu ba'atzilas shehu beklal ha'esas filas da'atzilas He b'chinas ois kei achreina de Shemavaya. The klal Shemavaya hula maila mi b'chinas mokel o elamas bi ukamoisha yiz boya. Va'arimamas al zo b'chinas hamalchus shanaso b'chinas keser lebiah. Shezehu kemoi shehi chutz le'atzilas shebo b'chinas koyach nivdal alidei b'kiyas ha'parasor. So, the Inin von Remus Atzmas Ariz Lamaila Keser Malchus Datzilas. What's it does? I mean, Malchus Datzilas is not Keser. Keser is Lamaila Mikol Asfiras, or Malchus is the Sof Madregas of Kol Atzilas. What does he mean by Keser Malchus Datzilas? And he said that's Inin von Remus Atzmi, yes. And then he said the Remus Alam is how that Malchus boikea es a parsa vanase koyach nivdal alidei the bekiyas a parsa. So the Inin bekitza is like this. The Inin von Sfiras HaMalchus already is mahava ilmus bi'ah. In other words, that the emes of Malchus of the Eibishter over bi'ah is expressed through the Sfira Achrein of Atzilus, which is Malchus Da'atzilu. However, it's brought down into this, that koya, and that ability, dafki to be mahava, the yesh mino ayin, dafki to bring about the beginning of Oilamas Priya, Yetzirah V'asir, Shahim, yesh nivdal, or that koya is dafki mushash be Atzmusa is boris. Musha Stavki at a very high madrega in Seiv called Almin and in Atzmus ain't Seiv. That's what the Alter Rebbe says in the famous chapter 20 over there in the Geras HaKodesh, or the Alter Rebbe brings that Hu Levadei Bekoiche V'yachelte Lahavis as Ayesh Me'ayim V'efesa. I'm going, you shouldn't do that, my son. If you do that, you have to wash your hands. Or you can be Menake becoming the Menake of Al Kopanim. So, if he's there, the koyach to be mahavu is a yesh me ayin v'efes amuchla, which is the koyach malchus tatzilas. Well, that draws when it comes to the etzim separation from malchus to become, as it were, mizgala the koyach to bring about the elements bi'ah, even though that's only the beginning of the Isnasis Alam. The truth is, of a hidden in that is a koyach atzmi of the Indian Keser, and Keser as well known, or as the Indian from Seivu Kalam, and Seivu Kalam is the koyach atzmas, v'chulu. Amamila, in Malchus, the Atzilas is miskada the koyach atzmas, milmaila ad, reish kolah, Madrigas in Kesa Gufa, the meaning for Reisha, the Lois Yada, the Pnimis, Kesa Mamish, or that comes down into Malchus Tatzilas in order to produce the beginning of the whole union of Malchus al Bria Yitzirava Asiya. However, that is still the union from Malchus al Miyuchad as one of the spirits in our Atzilas, how it is Lamaila from the Etzim Havdolah of Olam must be, or that union from Kesa, which is really the secret to the whole Koyak to be Mahavat, Olam must be, or that is Mitzad the Reima Masa. So that's how Kaviyohel, the Eivishter, Be'atzmus, will say, how Ochoponiments, Miskale, and the meaning from Tzeive, or that is the Pnimius and the Atzmius of Malchus de Atzila. And that's the Keser, Yesheba Malchus de Atzila. That's what's brought down, and we say on Friday afternoon, in the Pasuk Yahu, Keser, the EU, Keser Malchus, the EU Keser de Atzila, the EU Keser Malchus. In other words, the Dafki in the Inif Malchus de Atzila is Miskala, the Pnimis Ve'atzmius of Keser Elia. And that's the Inif and the Remus of the Melech Mitzad Atzmi. And Lafi Erech says, Miskala the Koech, afterwards to be Mishpashet Ala Am, or even in that Kufa, there are two Madrigas, as we'll see as we go along. However, after that, the Inif and Malchus Tatzilas then breaks through and penetrates, as you might say, the Indian of the Parsa between Atzilas le Biyah. We've had that Indian of the Parsa on many occasions. There's different Madrigas also in the Parsa, different levels in the Parsa. Although the word Parsa is an Aramaic word for curtain, and you notice that when an goes through a heavy curtain, then it becomes like a separate ore. It's almost not recognizable that that's the same word. It's just a Beshera Sharatmi. It is the same word. And that's called the which then becomes Shaykh to be Misnasa Al-Am on the Inif and Nivroim Olam as Priya V'Yatziravasi. And that becomes the Nakuda of Malchus. How it becomes what's called Shem Adne, as it brought down by in the Arizal, the Kisvei Arizal, that he said that then occurs a new Nakuda through that Bakia. There occurs a new Nakuda, what does it the Inif and the Kesem, how it is, or Ishayat to the Inif and is Nasus Al-Am, even that Kufa has a higher Madrigas we'll soon see, and that's the Inif of the Shem Adne, and therefore the Shem Adne, like the Gemara says, Brachas and Daf Zion, Shato Odoin Al Kol Maselcha, you are the Lord or the ruler of all your makings, literally, but that's only the Inif and his pashtas and of the Isnasus Al-Am. So how does that occur? How does it come? Through the Inif of the Parasa. And that's what we see, that the Bekia of the Parasa. So here we see the word Bekia means to split, means to split through. Because on the one hand, the Inif and a Parasa is like a, how do you call it, opposition to the Ur. That when the Ur suddenly hits the Parsa, it almost prevents the Ur from coming through. And the Ur has to literally break through the Parsa. It's got to split through the Parsa. Well, that's one of the Inyonim. We say that Yaakov, the second name of Yaakov Avinu, Yaakov is Roshan Bekia. Yaakov Oz Yiboka Kashachar Erecha. We say that the morning star had become the Alisa Shachar. But all of a sudden I found lying around in my room on the floor something about a Otmimim page or Otmimim report. But a whole series of times, Alisa Shachar and the Omid Shachar and Neitza Chamam and all sorts of good that I've never seen in my life before.
It's Yaron's publication, you don't start.
It's not publication.
No, it's Yaron's publication, puts it up in the dormitory.
Oh yeah? Very good. So you guys are always supposed to know. The shaila is, when does anybody get up to feel all these zmanim? Go on to a series of zmanim, to the shkia, the do teisa chachovim, and I mean from Amud Shachar, Neitza Chama, and so Zman Krishma, and Chatzes, Hayoim, and Chatzes Halayla, and I found it laying on the floor in the office. Maybe when I Kiddush Godel, you know, we should do it. Anyway, anything to cause a bit of a smile or some sort of a service on the part of the Shemim, So anyway, as I said, that this in from Bekia tzarich here. So we see that in the Seder that when oil hits a parsa, you barely see the oil on the other side. So it's written, but again to Yankiv, we know that he represents in his lower name the coming down of the oil into Biyah, and it's also Russian Yiboka. Yankiv is always Yiboka. Libaka means to split through something, literally to break a split in it and get out. That's what it means. So similarly, the oil is Bekia. It breaks through the parsa. So mitzad echad, what comes out on the other side is a much weaker gilui of the oil. Over mitzad sheni, to break through something, you have to build up a certain koyach. The inyan from Bekia is indicatory of a very high, and that's why we have a cloud in the Arizal that the Staushel Sodim is wherever you get a gilui of a keser, no matter what level it is, it always has in itself a certain shleimus of the inyan of keser elyon and even keser harishon, keser diak for kul. All the kesorim have a certain shaykhs one to the other. And remember that keser of atzilus, which is the reimon sa'atzmi, is, that breaks through the parsa and becomes the nekudas Hashem adni al kol hamasi. Well, that's already a for lisnasis al am. It's not the isnas. Oh, but there has to be a trace of the isnasis atzmis bezeh. That's the take for the and amalgam which breaks through, and that's the nekuda we're making, that in the isnasis al am is hidden anyway. The isnasis atzmis and vahim be'erach l'zeh vahim lefi erach zeh es zeh. That's the whole point that the Rebbe is making. And that inyan for roimim is ha'atzmis, or that's the inyan the keser malchus of atil, or that's a gilui. He said, and that's the inyan of the ois keir the shem avaya. Well, that's the mile from any inyan of being even a mokel olam as biyah, and yet nonetheless the remus al am zo p'chinas al malchus shenas p'chinas keser lebi. There is a certain connection. That even though that's only a ha'orabuad, but it's a bokeya, and therefore it brings with it a gilui of the inim from keser malchus, and that becomes a inim from keser lebiyah, shezo kamoy shehu chutz li'atzilas, shebo b'koyach nivdal, al yidei b'kiyas ha'parsa. So that's legabi, as a word, the chisoron bedova. Over the penimis bedova is moving, that's a inim of teikif, keser, even though it's only Reimamus al Am. So we see that the Reimamus al Am, despite the fact it's a lower madrega, it's always lefi erach the Reimamus ha'atzmiyah. Mashu Kosov Melech Shmoy Nikra Aleim. I know we said that Melech is only a inyan from Shem. I know B'chinas is Pashtas Hashem, Shem B'chinas Reimamus al Am. The hine bereimus zu, hine bereimus alam, yesh kam ken beisma dreiger. And that's what we'll see as we go along now, that even in the reimus alam, there are also two madregas. One, the gilui klolius, and then a ha'orif, and that pashtas mizer atzmai. And therefore we see that in the first level of the reimus alam is still a toikef ha'gilui and a toikef ha'hergesh, as you might call it, of the reimus atzmai. Good, so we'll hold there for this evening, and we'll continue in coming and developing episode. So it's very important the careful chazara in Yonim Elu. So I just want to make a few remarks now, and that is that